This was supposed to be Aston Martin's future. Honda, Newey, Alonso, a new regulations era. Instead, just 3 races into 2026, they've got a car so troubled that drivers have reportedly feared permanent nerve damage. A team principal warning publicly about the physical pain inside the cockpit, and now, most explosively of all, a statement from Honda that suggests the problem may not be the power unit at all. Because if Honda is telling the truth, then Aston Martin's crisis runs much deeper than anyone wanted to admit. This is no longer just an engine issue. This is a full team failure in the making. At Suzuka, there was at least one small mercy for Aston Martin. They finally managed to get a car to the end of a full Grand Prix distance. Fernando Alonso finished 18th, a lap down, ahead of only the Cadillac pair of Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. Lance Stroll didn't even make the finish, retiring on lap 31 with a suspected water pressure issue. And bizarrely, that counted as progress. In Shanghai, Stroll had lasted just 9 laps, and both Aston Martin drivers failed to finish. 3 races into a new rules cycle, this team isn't just uncompetitive. It looks fragile, uncomfortable, confused, and increasingly divided between what's being said publicly and what may be happening behind the scenes. The most alarming issue has been the vibration coming through the Honda power unit. Before the Australian Grand Prix, Adrian Newey revealed that both Alonso and Stroll had raised concerns that, if they kept enduring the vibrations for too many laps, they could risk permanent nerve damage. That's not the kind of language you hear in Formula One unless something has gone very, very wrong. After China, Stroll called the sensation very uncomfortable. Alonso admitted he'd had some temporary relief on Friday in Suzuka, only for the pain to return on Saturday. And crucially, Alonso also said it didn't look like a quick fix. At that point, most people assumed the blame sat squarely with Honda. New engine partner, new regulations, new packaging problems. It made sense. But then came Koji Watanabe's comments at the FIA press conference in Japan. And suddenly, the entire picture changed. Watanabe said, "In the test on the dyno, the vibration is acceptable level. But once we integrate in the actual chassis, that vibration is getting much more than the test on the dyno." And then the key line, "Only PU cannot solve the problem." We are really closely working together with Aston Martin Aramco to solve the problem, not only the power unit, but also together with the chassis. That is an extraordinary admission, because Honda is effectively saying the power unit on its own was within acceptable limits. It was only when Aston Martin put that engine into the AMR26 chassis that the issue became severe. And if that's true, Aston Martin's 2026 problems are not just mechanical, they're structural. This is where the story becomes more uncomfortable. Aston Martin entered this era with enormous expectations. This was the team building toward championship contention. Lawrence Stroll had invested heavily. Adrian Newey had been brought in as both team principal and managing technical partner. A massive statement of ambition and intent. Honda had joined the project. The infrastructure, the money, the names, it all pointed in one direction. But prestige does not guarantee coherence. When a car has severe vibration issues, reliability concerns, poor pace, and still leaves senior figures publicly hinting that the fault lies across both chassis and engine integration, it raises an obvious question. Who got this wrong? Because somebody did. And in Formula One, the most dangerous kind of internal tension is not open conflict. It's diffused responsibility. When the engine manufacturer says the dyno numbers were acceptable, when the chassis side suggests the problem is still being understood, when the drivers are left to absorb the physical consequences, and when the results continue to collapse, blame starts moving in circles. That's when trust erodes. Paddock whispers are already getting louder. Some believe the Newey-led technical structure has inherited a car concept that wasn't fully ready for the demands of the new rules. Others suspect the packaging compromises around the Honda installation were too aggressive, creating resonance issues that didn't fully appear in simulation. And there are those who think Aston Martin tried to chase an extreme concept too early and are now paying for it in reliability, drivability, and driver confidence. None of that has been confirmed officially. But the fact those conversations are happening at all, in April, tells you everything. Then, there are the drivers. Fernando Alonso is not a driver who panics easily. He has seen dysfunctional projects before, survived them, and usually knows exactly when to keep criticism subtle. So when Alonso says a problem is not a quick fix, that matters. It's measured language, but it carries weight. Stroll's description of the car as very uncomfortable was blunter and perhaps more revealing. Because discomfort in Formula One is normal. Pain to the point of concern is not. The deeper issue is what repeated physical suffering does to driver confidence. A driver can tolerate a slow car. A driver can sometimes even tolerate an unreliable one. But if the machinery is actively punishing them lap after lap, the relationship between driver and team changes. Patience disappears faster. Communication becomes sharper. Frustration becomes public. And Aston Martin can't afford that. Not with Alonso. Not in a season that was meant to launch a new chapter. But the problems aren't only technical. When a team is this far off the pace, strategy starts to unravel too. Not because strategy alone is causing the crisis, but because weak cars expose every operational flaw. Pit wall decisions become reactive rather than decisive. Race plans become survival exercises. A weekend stops being about maximizing points and starts being about damage limitation. At Suzuka, finishing a race a lap down in 18th was treated as a minor positive. That tells you how low the bar has fallen. And in Formula One, once a team starts redefining success in those terms, the psychology changes. Engineers become defensive. Leadership becomes cautious. Public messaging becomes about understanding problems rather than solving them. That's often the early sign of a much deeper crisis. What makes Aston Martin's situation even more uncomfortable is the comparison with the rest of the grid. Elsewhere, teams are dealing with performance gaps, floor issues, driver swaps, and political noise. Ferrari has had its own technical compromises. Alpine has had to publicly deny bizarre online claims about unequal treatment for Franco Colapinto. Chaos exists everywhere in Formula One. But Aston Martin's chaos feels different, because this wasn't meant to be a rebuilding story. This was supposed to be the arrival of a super team. Instead, the paddock is now asking whether one of the most heavily backed projects in the sport has launched a new era with a chassis severe enough to amplify acceptable engine vibration into a serious driver welfare issue. That is not a normal teething problem. That is a design and integration alarm bell. And from a technical standpoint, the implications are serious. If Honda's dyno testing showed acceptable vibration levels, but the issue worsened dramatically once installed, that points to resonance through the chassis, mounting behavior, packaging stiffness, or the broader interaction between power unit and car architecture. In simple terms, the engine may be shaking the car in ways Aston Martin did not predict, or the car may be magnifying what the engine is doing. Either way, this is not a simple bolt-on fix. This is the kind of issue that can force teams into uncomfortable compromises. Different mounting solutions, altered cooling layouts, revised structural components, maybe even performance sacrifices just to keep the drivers functioning and the car finishing races. That's why Alonso's "not a quick fix" comment is so important. He may already know what the rest of the outside world is only beginning to suspect, and the consequences could be huge. A poor start under new regulations is damaging enough on its own, but a poor start caused by a fundamental chassis integration problem can poison an entire season. Development gets diverted into firefighting. Correlations get questioned. Internal confidence drops. And the dream of building momentum for future title contention starts slipping away before summer has even arrived. For Honda, this is also awkward. For all the diplomatic language, Watanabe's remarks clearly shift at least part of the spotlight onto Aston Martin's side of the garage. And once an engine manufacturer starts publicly drawing that distinction, even gently, people notice. Because behind closed doors, those conversations are rarely gentle. So yes, Aston Martin finally finished a full race distance at Suzuka. But that small milestone may have been overshadowed by something much bigger. Honda has now revealed that the most disturbing issue on the car may only become severe once the power unit is fitted into Aston Martin's chassis. And if that's the case, then the team's crisis is no longer just about vibrations, reliability, or lack of pace. It's about leadership, design judgment, technical integration, and whether one of Formula One's most ambitious projects has fundamentally misread the start of a new era. 3 races in, the warning signs are everywhere. The car is slow. The car is fragile. The drivers are unhappy. And the explanations are starting to point in different directions. That's what makes this so serious. Because in Formula One, a team can survive a bad weekend.